Grant us, Lord, not to be anxious about earthly things, but to love things heavenly. And even now, while we are placed among things that are passing away, to hold fast to those that shall endure. Amen. Amen. When my daughter Elena was about 10 months old, so a very long time ago, I was flying home alone with her on a long flight from San Juan to San Antonio after we had been visiting her grandparents and family down there. Well, unbeknownst to any of us, she had just developed an ear infection. So yes, you all know where this is heading. From the time that we started to ascend during takeoff until we finally set down in San Antonio, she was pretty miserable. And so were the rest of the passengers on that flight. No matter what I tried to do, nurse her, bounce her, rock her, she just couldn't settle down. God bless her. And I will be forever grateful to the flight attendant who eventually came and offered to walk her up and down the aisles, and did so very comfortingly. And that did help Elena a bit. But that experience certainly humbled me, to say the least. Humbled me when I thought of the times previously when I had been one of those other passengers, and my first thought when hearing a crying child on the plane had not been, "Oh, that poor child. God bless them. What can I do to help?" So I wonder how much it might affect our reaction to our gospel reading this morning if Jesus had held up such a child who was miserable or cranky or just a real handful. And if Jesus had said, "Whoever welcomes a child such as this one welcomes me." We place tremendous amounts of time, energy, and resources into raising our children. We value our children, and I would hope that we convey a sense of welcome to children here. And because we do value our children today, even when cranky, I think we can miss in our gospel lesson for this morning just how radical it was for Jesus to hold up a child and to say that whoever welcomes a child such as this one welcomes him and the one who sent him. For both Jews and Romans in the first century, children held an interesting position in the household. They represented the future. They would carry on the family name, provide and care for their aging parents, and produce the next generation. But in the present, they were a liability. The mortality rate for children was high. They were part of the household labor force, but not yet fully productive. And they were still another mouth to feed. In some respects, it is said that children were lower than slaves. An adult slave was worth something, and yet even the youngest child was a member of the family, an honor to which a slave was unlikely and in most cases unable to ever attain. So in a way, children were insiders who were left on the outside. And here is Jesus holding up this child and commanding us to welcome such a one of no power or value, who has been left on the outside. And one can see this as yet another example of Jesus turning the world's definition of power and greatness on its head. This is a great reversal in the name of justice, the kind that we find particularly in the Gospel of Luke. Think of the Magnificat. He has put down the mighty from their seat and has exalted the humble and meek. But with Mark, there was also something else going on here. It is not merely a question of who is great and who is not, but very much a question of welcome. Jesus is interested in who acts with the greatest compassion and love. And how do we welcome someone who is seen as needy by society, as someone that others might see who bring nothing to the table? If Jesus were speaking to us today, whom might he hold up? And who is it that can be seen to be overlooked because we might not see them as having much value, or might even be seen as drains, as just another mouth to feed, or drains on time and energy? Over these past weeks, months, years, we have certainly heard much about the concerns of refugees flooding European countries, of immigration, of immigrants crossing our borders into the United States. And yes, there are some significant issues to take into account as nations scramble to welcome thousands at a time. At the most basic level, issues of food, clothing, housing, infrastructure, not to mention people's concerns over the impact on a nation's economy or security, religious, cultural, and social fabric. And these are all real concerns and considerations. And yet, what are we to do with Jesus' message of whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all? And whoever welcomes one of the least in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. We know that the baptismal covenant is central to our faith and practice as Episcopalians. It pops up all the time. I know I bring it up all the time. It is a guide for us to live our daily lives. And each time that we affirm our baptismal promises, we profess that we will seek to serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves, always with God's help. A vow at once seemingly simple, and yet, as we know, can be so very challenging. It is only through God's grace that we can even begin to see Christ in all persons. And who are those, again, who might be seen as the least in our midst, in our communities? Who are those who merely by their presence challenge us and make us feel uncomfortable simply because we perceive them as not like us? And how do we welcome these people? And once we start using the words these people and those people, we have a big problem. the problem of who is in and who is out. In welcoming, I think we can be self-conscious about what should we say. And we can often be afraid of saying or doing something which can offend another person. We can get stuck with analysis paralysis. And yet, we can begin by doing something as simple and as challenging as not turning away from someone, but instead creating an opening, a starting point, and providing even a small, safe space with a sincere hello, acknowledging that someone is not invisible. And we do not always know what someone is going through or where they are coming from. Acknowledging that underlying any of our differences, each and every one of us is a child of God. For our abilities, our health, our wealth, and any characteristics that we may use to define and divide us, all will pass away. But our identity as children of God will endure. Amen.